Hey, how you doing? This is Ed Brown. Oh, the temperature is terrible out there, but we have something very, very special here. We have Marguerite Morris, and we have Jennifer Foxworthy, and we're going to talk about and make an appeal for the Catholic Sales Incorporated. This is a young lady that just was ready to graduate from the University of Maryland, and we were working for a penny. She had a fatal accident or whatever. But anyway, there were some problems with it, and her mother, Marguerite, is here, and she's making an appeal to anyone that knows basically what she can do to get further information about this particular case. It'd be a Civilian Investigation Act and a Military Protection Act. She's proposing these things because in honor of her daughter. Welcome, Marguerite Morris. How are you doing?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm doing just fine.
Sorry to hear about the situation, but you got a #1 person here, and Jennifer Foxworthy.
Yes,
Jennifer's been on before, and actually she's here to help Marguerite. As far as Ms. Morris is going to give us some background. Ms. Morris, tell us a little background about this situation with your daughter and the problems that you're having. And you have these problems with Anne Arundel County, right?
Yes, some of them do relate to Anne Arundel County.
Okay. Well, tell us about your daughter.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. Again, my name is Marguerite Morris, and my daughter's name was Catherine Sarah Morris. And in memory of her, she died on May 6, 2012, and in memory of her, we started it For Kathy's Sake Incorporated. Catherine died under some very challenging circumstances, and we've been pursuing things on her behalf. One of them has to do with the military, and the other has to do with things in reference to her death investigation. What we'd first like to focus on today is what we're calling the Catherine Morris Military Spouse Protection Act. And basically, we say that Catherine died from basic allowance for housing fraud. And I know people may hear that and you're saying some know what that is and some don't know what that is. But basic allowance housing fraud is basic allowance for housing is a military benefit. And we've heard through the years that this kind of fraud has been prevalent in the military. And a lot of times when we hear about it, we think about soldiers marrying women or men or whomever for benefits or for green cards and get citizenship. But actually there are other components for it. It's a very prevalent fraud that happens here in the United States. And Catherine was a victim of it, and as a result, they're alleging that she committed suicide. And we have, in order to help spouses like her and others, we have started the Catherine Morris Military Spouse Protection Act awareness effort, which is to garner congressional or senators' support so that we can get some kind of act with her name on it to help other people like her, to prevent this from happening from someone else. Now, the way basic allowance for housing fraud works is she was targeted by a soldier. Catherine was a 4th-year University of Maryland student. She was a daughter of my husband and I, leaders in the community, pastors, and all of that. And she was away at school, and she met a soldier and somebody that just didn't turn out to be very good for her. But she fell in love with him, and his whole thing was for a military benefit.
Yes, unfortunately.
And that's a tragedy that's happened. He targeted her to do the scam with. Not that she was a participant, she was a victim. And the results are that he got more of a penalty for buying a hamburger with a government credit card than he and others played in a part that contributed to this child's death. Not only that, as a result of the United States military not charging him with fraud, he received a $100,000 payout on an insurance policy that was only 4 months old and had no suicide clause. So in light of that and the fact that they had options and just did not charge him with fraud is a reason that we would like to produce or get someone to help us introduce that act, not only for victims of basic allowance for housing fraud, but also for others that, because anytime you have benefit systems anywhere in the country, there are going to be people that abuse them.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Take
this
advantage of it.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So this is not about our, picking on the military. It's just that we have a good program, we have good soldiers, but every now and then you come across people that take advantage of it. And even though they have many protections in place, the fact here is that you have a girl at 22 years of age that is now dead as a result of someone abusing a military benefit. And the military, unfortunately, like in other instances of abuse, they've opted not to do anything about it.
And the military was the initial organization that investigated, or was it the Anne Arundel Police?
Well, again, there are two components, and I don't want to talk about the second piece for a while because but the first piece, there were investigations into her death. But what her dad and I, and he's also now deceased, and I believe he died of a broken heart as well. He died a year after her. What we focused on initially was the military piece. We were, just trying to get someone outside of his chain of command to look into the things around her death. And that's what a lot of things in the Senate right now are trying to remove certain powers from that direct chain of command so that, you get impartial people that make decisions. And so we tried for that first year to get them to just remove it from the chain of command, who just, not getting into the intricacies of what happened, but they had an option. And all they had to do was charge this soldier with fraud, and he wouldn't have collected on that $100,000. And I mean, we pushed, and he was convicted of things after her death. It's a very tragic, a lot of tragic circumstances around it. If people want details around that, though, they can check out her website because we've posted documents and so much information there.
And what is that website again?
That website is www.forkathysake.com.
Okay.
And that's for Kathy Sake with a K, ATHYSSAKE.com.
Okay.
And they can pull up the documents in reference to the military. They can pull up the investigation, what they did, the reports they did. There's a lot that goes on with that. And what I wanted to point out too is, again, there's so much information, but we can't change, and this is not about us changing the way that Kathy died or getting someone charged. This is about us taking her death and those tragic circumstances around it and finding a way to help people right now in her memory. And that's why we're appealing. We just, matter of fact, finished up with an awareness luncheon just a little, not quite
July
2 weeks ago.
That
Dr. Ife Williams, the National Congress of Black Women, was our keynote speaker. And we had organizations, individuals come in, delegates, and a couple of the Congress people sent letters of support for that effort. So we're trying to draw awareness and to help others in her memory, because this should not happen to anyone, that someone gets more of a penalty for buying a hamburger rather than what they did in contributing to the death of your child, and that they walked away with eventually a $100,000 payout.
Wow.
And that's something that just shouldn't happen in this country, and we call it friendly fire. We
Right.
do, because it was something that the war is not here on our soil. It's supposed to be over there. But you have victims here, and we're not alone. That was one of the things that we talked about before as well. It's not just Marguerite Morris that lost a child. There are many in our country that are going through under similar circumstances and want some sort of opportunity to fairness in this. And we've not been able to
Jennifer,
find it.
tell us your involvement with Ms. Morris.
Miss Marguerite, Reverend Marguerite, I love this lady so dearly. A good friend of mine actually attended class with Miss Marguerite, and as Miss Marguerite was sharing that she wanted to do this awareness luncheon, my friend chimed in and said, hey, I have a friend who does conferences. Maybe she can help in some way. And I've had Miss Marguerite's back ever since. We've been talking nonstop for the past several months. I can relate to this on both sides. This is a domestic violence. What her daughter Kathy faced was economical, emotional, and mental abuse, because she married this person thinking that he was a person of his word. he's a member of the armed forces, and that he would follow through, because we have a code of conduct of honor, courage, and commitment. So by him receiving these extra benefits and not giving Kathy any, she became the estranged wife. So that was the economical abuse. And then the mental and emotional of, what's going on? Why are you treating me so different? And his alleged, extramarital affairs and everything else. It's just, the circumstances are just so horrible and convoluted. So this was a form of domestic violence, and I am a domestic violence thriver, so I understand those components. As a service member who served for 21 years, I've answered those phone calls while on duty of spouses who are just calling any number on the base trying to find their husband. Unfortunately, Mr. Brown, it is easy to circumvent or keep the civilian spouse from knowing anything. You can easily say, well, I belong with the Navy SEALs and I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you my comings or goings. I have a top secret clearance. If I tell you something, then I have to kill you. So service members, they can be very cunning, and unfortunately, there's a few bad apples, and it spoils the bunch for those who are serving a country honorably.
I'd like to add to that too, because as you were speaking, I realized that even with what this soldier was doing, he boasted about it. And there are probably, and maybe this talk will reach someone that knows something because they were never asked. Right. This was not even done in secret. He boasted about it. He bragged about it. That $100,000 in insurance, we as the parents of this child never knew about it. He has yet to this day to tell us that he had that policy. He has yet to this day to pay anything other than $860 towards her funeral. He has yet to this day to go to her funeral. I mean, he has not been, to our knowledge, back in the state of Maryland. He's not said anything to us as parents other than to call us 2 days before when we're viewing her, on our way to view her body, to ask us for the address of the funeral pile.
Home, yes.
And then he went to another funeral pile and picked up the death certificate and went and filed for the insurance. So this was so outrageous. This was not something where these two never lived together. There was never a name change, exchange of rings. He lied on what we're talking about is that when he took that, he tricked her into marrying, or he didn't trick her. What he did was he got her to not tell her parents for a season. And then he took that marriage license back to his base and filed for benefits. So our thing with the Catherine Morris Military Spouse Protection Act is that when that happened, there should have been a flag in the system that says, well, wait a minute, where's her DEERS card associated with his Social Security number? Every military spouse knows the spouse's Social Security. Everything is under that Social Security number. Where are her benefits that are connected with
medical, dental, going to the commissary.
All of that.
All of those spousal benefits.
And the thing about that is that there are more than likely other young women or older women, whomever, men, women, that are victims of the same thing right now. They have married someone, that person has disappeared, and they are off somewhere collecting on the benefits.
Yes.
And our thing about abuse is that this is a form of abuse because you have people that hurt. And whether Kathy did or did not take her life, that was a devastating thing when you actually love someone, but you were targeted for a benefit. And you talk about talking to people in position. When I had a conversation with someone from the governor's office, their conversation with me was this: they were like, we're concerned about where is he at now? Because with a $100,000 payout, this is a crime that may very well be repeated.
Absolutely.
It's an easy $100,000 for somebody. This is reality.
Absolutely.
So people that don't understand, we're talking about basic allowance for housing fraud, and we're not bashing our military. But I'm a parent, like other parents, not alone, that has a daughter that is potentially in her grave over something, an abuse of an allowance. And then a lack of accountability. So we have to tighten it up and fix it.
The accountability, tell us a little bit, what do you think, since you were in the military, what do you think is a solution to something like that?
Well, I do believe because this case and the highlights around it, that there's a lot of loopholes, sir, that need to be closed. Again, it's not uncommon for a service member, Most of the time they go to a foreign port, they woo a woman who cannot speak English. They bring her over, she gets her green card, and now she is dependent on that service member to be her mouth,
right,
because she can't speak English.
Right.
So, and now they're married. He's getting the financial benefits. You know, more than likely, there's only one account. The spouse does not have an account. So now that's economical abuse because she's not able to freely spend like she wants to.
She can't even go to commissary.
She can't go to get help. And then if they have children, now that adds on to why that person is stuck. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was familiar with these situations where the service member, you shine my shoes, you iron my uniform, you don't go anywhere, you stay in the house. And it's unfortunate, but many spouses, they become alcohol abusers and addicts. Because what do you do when you're in the house all day long? The kids are at school. You can't go anywhere because the service member is always calling. Where are you at? You better not have been gone.
Right,
you stay in the house. You better have my meal cooked. This is domestic violence
Right,
in all
it's
forms.
of that, and that's exactly what we're dealing with.
Exactly, it's unfortunate, and
because mental abuse is just as devastating as physical abuse. They all
Yes,
tie together,
certainly. Yeah.
and they all
But you
have
can't see the
fallout,
scars.
and all have victims. And that's the
Yeah.
thing about it. You cannot see the scars because they're internal. Absolutely.
And-
So yeah, Kathy died under some very
and I know that the military, they're focused on the mission. So they don't have time
for
to
the
worry about this domestic issues. You know, what goes
or
on
they're
in your
very
home.
loose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, what goes on in your house, we expect you to take care of that. And they have an ombudsman, but unfortunately, it seems that the command didn't even know that Kathy existed as his spouse.
That's very true because we work with the military spouse advocate, national military spouse advocate, and she advised of one of the forms that allegedly every commander should be signing. And interestingly, I asked for that form in Catherine's FOIA request, Freedom of Information, and they told me that they couldn't find that form. And that's not saying they didn't sign it, just the military conveniently couldn't find it. Because that officer is kind of signing his John Hancock to say that I know about this marriage and yada, 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 but in that instance, they didn't even know he was married. And I'm still wondering about that because I said he boasted about it. He did not, there were people that gave sworn statements that this kid complained, boasted, and bragged about it. It's very, this is enough to fill a book. It really is. But we just want people to know today that this is out there. They can visit that website and message us about lending support, about getting involved. We get a lot of response, just like when you go to speak about domestic violence and those issues, because I ran a domestic violence shelter as well for several years. But you get the phone calls. We're getting communications that I've been through this, I suffered through this, or some other abuse of a military benefit. We know there are many crimes in the world. People do this all over the place, but still, we've got to figure out a way to pick up on these loose ends.
A government, this is a government agency. You figure that they would be, as far as records keeping, they'd be.
well, let me tell you.
And not knowing basically that he was married, he would have to. Maybe they have a chain of command that when you get married, you got to report it. Maybe that doesn't exist simply because a serviceman is all over the world, and like you were saying, he may meet a young lady, a young man overseas, which mother and father have no idea.
Absolutely.
And then they actually set them up for abuse when they bring them here because they're not familiar with procedure. And the lack of procedure, when the individual marries, is to me tantamount to,
That's exactly correct. Absolutely. That's one of our things too, is that people, spouses gaining access, and they have, and that's the thing about too, they have to take responsibility as well on both sides. You have spouses that abuse it and spouses that could, but they need to take the opportunity, but also put something in place that requires them to, urges them to, and to show up physically to determine what's going on with them. And when you talk about that, I wanted to if it's okay, I'm not sure how our time is, but also to transition into the other piece. Because, you know, when Catherine died, there were other people that were involved. There was another soldier and someone else. And these individuals, if I could say really quickly, you know, it was so grievous that they had aliases, they come at her on the internet. Catherine actually uncovered this scam herself months before she died. It wasn't something that just popped up, but she had uncovered it. She had collected data. She started saving records. She started, you know, and so
and you had these things available.
What Catherine
for
did,
investigation.
What Catherine Sarah Morris did, Catherine started emailing records, pictures, information she had gathered into different folders on her computer, as if she were afraid somebody was going to get into her computer. So when we got into her records and we're checking the school records, these things are popping up, things she found out, things she found out.
She was
and
keeping
so
documentation.
Yes, sir. And when the day she died, and I don't know how much time I have, I just really want to get into this a little bit. The day she died, her sister got into her account, and we found these communications that were coming at Catherine. They come at Catherine 3 days before she died. Catherine also, the day she died, had also emailed a threat to go to the Inspector General about individuals other than the soldier, another soldier and another civilian that were military. Yes, sir.
That were familiar with the situation.
That were involved with this situation.
Okay,
she actually threatened to go to the authorities, and then the next day or so, Catherine is dead. So when Catherine died and her sister got into those communications, there were some conversations that basically led to us, if you don't
being suspicious.
Well,
okay.
no.
Well, let's get into this Civilian Investigating Act now.
Well, that's where I'm going with this.
Okay.
Those individuals were using aliases, and it turned out once the investigation started that they were actually other military individuals using aliases. So what the military did was immediately, they did their part. They confiscated the electronics that they had. They read these 3 individuals their rights, and the 3 individuals their rights, and then they stood by ready to take action against them, or whatever that is. But they confiscated the government-issued electronics, but in order to do the civilian, they had to have the civilian police take that order.
Okay.
The civilian police who had become involved responded to the scene. Catherine's body was found at Arundel Mills Mall on May the 6th that morning. From that part, basically the military told the civilian told the military they didn't need anything, and so that kind of dropped the military piece.
Well,
we go to civilian piece. The tragedy on that side is what I wanted to get into today.
Okay, well, tell us about it.
Well, that's another equally as a deep part of this is that when Catherine's body was found, the civilian police Googled, Kathy died from carbon monoxide poisoning from a grill that was lit in her car. And that carbon monoxide obviously ended her life. All doors were open on her car. That could have been suicide, or it could have been staged as a suicide.
Right.
The civilian police at that time, we have alleged for 4 years that they have not given this matter a proper investigation because of all the parts you've already heard. We've been alleging that for 4 years. We know from records and FOIA information that they Googled the method of death at the car side there that night in the parking lot that morning or whatever. We know that from that there were persons that responded to the scene that were all over the car, and people can see that depositions videotaped out on the website. We know that her car was under video surveillance the entire time it was in a parking lot at Arundel Mills Mall, but that video surveillance was destroyed, or most of it destroyed, let me correct that. So you have a video from 3 or 4 different cameras that has been tampered with, that was in the possession of the Anne Arundel County Police and or an officer
So that's
of the
when
law.
the civilian, that's what you're talking about with the Civilian Investigation Act.
There's
Well,
rush to
that would have to
suicide.
come from the county, wouldn't it?
Well-
Associated with the police, because the police are under the county.
Well,
directly
we
on
have
the
gone.
county.
Let me back up a little. Again, I know time is
Okay,
precious.
well, yeah, we only have a few minutes now,
Well,
and
very
I want to
quickly.
wrap up with that civilian involvement in it. And why is it? I was surprised that they weren't. Freedom of Information Act is that you have to pay for information that you are getting from the county.
Yes, sir. We have alleged for the last 4 years that it didn't handle the investigation right. There are so many things that went atrociously incorrect.
Right.
We're trying to get the investigation into her death, even though it's closed. We want how it was handled moved outside
But it was
of Anne Arundel
closed
County.
by the
Anne Arundel County Police.
Okay, all
And
right.
we have been trying to get it looked at by someone outside of Anne Arundel County, because for 3 or 4 years we've been asking them to basically police themselves. We have private eyes and investigative firms outside the state of Maryland in 4 different states that do not agree with their findings, and that they say that this case was not handled incorrectly. So I did a FOIA request to the Anne Arundel County Police for internal communications from the time my daughter died. Those internal communications, they want me as a mom to pay them up front before they will release any one of them, from $5,300 to $7,100 up front in cash before they will release a single internal communication,
Okay.
even though, sir, I have already given them $1,116.22.
Well,
and
what
have not
about
seen a
this
single email.
this civilian that you propose investigation
Horrible
act?
that what Ms. Marguerite is having to go through in order to find justice on behalf of her daughter is just egregious. I mean, $7,000 just to get this information, and that's why the organization, the awareness luncheon, and she's just trying so hard to bring this out.
This is one of the many things that challenge us, and if people would visit the website, I haven't maybe not explained it, really well,
Okay.
but
Well,
they
why
can
don't
see it
we
there.
we have to wind this up? Give
Yes,
that
sir.
website again, and
It's-
I'll have individuals. What you need to do is go to that website and find out for yourself. I am with homework. This is ridiculous. For our system to be functioning like that, because here. If you make a challenge, then they punish you for making a challenge, and that happens all through the world. Once you start an investigation or something like that, they make it difficult, and they're doing it economically and financially because that's the way to discourage people from
Absolutely.
continuation.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And
Make
to
you go
me,
away.
that's a
Make you
sign
go
that
away.
something's wrong there.
Yes, sir.
And I'm hoping that the Anne Arundel County Police and also the military start listening to the citizens. And this is something that's not just one individual's involved in it.
it's not.
This is all through. I know I was in the service. All through the service,
Yes.
these things are happening, and really, it happens to a lot of wives that can't speak English. The men are stationed in other areas, and they're brought here, and they're mistreated. And so, what we want to do then, once again, Mrs. Marsh, tell us that website quickly.
For KathySake.com, FORKATHYSSAKE.com.
Okay, thank you very much. And you heard it here on Ed Brown Show. And I tell you, this is something that all of us should be aware of because it could happen to you.